You guys, welcome back to the Self Selecting Podcast. I am your host, Corey Hagman, and here we have Nick Bagley. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm just getting over I got wrecked on Saturday. I kid you not, I same, yeah, I just
Yeah.
completely fucked like
Mine was Sunday, but you can
Sunday.
probably still hear it.
I sound like I'm not staying within super physiological levels, I'll tell you that.
Hello, buddy. Can you go watch a movie? Go watch a movie, buddy. Yeah, I got wrecked with a sinus infection. I had him last weekend. I'll have him this weekend again. And Sunday, I had to tell his mom to come get him because I was it wasn't happening.
Oh,
It put me down hard. So I'll go back to work tomorrow for the first time. Quit. Get out of here. Dog, go away. Everything's coming in here. Go away, Marley.
you guys, we are joined by Nick's son Everett and Nick's fur baby. Do we have a name for fur baby?
That's Marley.
Marley
Yeah.
and Marley. So we will have intermittent guest, and y'all will appreciate it. Thank you for doing this, man. Especially with how you're
Of course.
feeling. Today was supposed. So I don't think I've shared with you, but like I started batching my podcast recording days. So usually I'll do 2 to 3 guests, but then I'll do 2 solos earlier in the day. So that's like my full day, and
Yeah, you've been podcasting a lot, huh?
dude, way too much. It's an unreasonable amount. I need to talk to my boss because this is insane.
Yeah, it's good though. I love it. It's been doing really well. Like I enjoy all the stuff you've been putting out. So I send it to clients all the time.
I appreciate that. Well, so I kind of want to kick this off. I want to give listeners just insight into who you are, just what you're doing in the space, because you're making a name for yourself, and you're based in Dallas, right? Which is like
Yes.
not that's not nowhere. That's a big fitness like bodybuilding hub.
Yeah, it's cool. It's awesome. Yeah, so I mean, I've been personal training in the Dallas area for the last almost 5 years, and then like the last three has been building the online coaching. Oh yeah, you got your truck? Can you take it out there? Yeah, go ahead. So been at Destination Dallas for the last 3 years. Kind of when I started doing the online coaching and stuff. And to be honest, the connections that I've made along the way is really what's been able to get me to that spot of like making a name for myself. Is just I've been very lucky to be in the right rooms at the right time and meet the right people. And I've said it before, but like I've never gone into any situation with somebody trying to get something out of them. I just want to know who they are, and it's put me in some cool rooms, and I've met a lot of smart people that way. And like I was a C student in college, so I'm not exactly the smartest person ever, but I put myself around smarter people so that I can continue to build that knowledge and stuff. And I'm grateful for the people who have decided to work with me. And this last year it's picked up a lot, so it's been cool. I've got 3 people going to nationals this year. I've got a heavyweight bodybuilder, a classic physique guy, and a wellness girl, and they're all coming together great. So I'm super excited to see how they go.
Dude, that's incredible. And I mean, like to be so diversified across different divisions, I mean that takes a lot of talent. And it takes obviously a high degree of skill in client management, specifically on the interpersonal side. So I want to get into a little bit like, so predominantly, do you work with majority of men, majority of women?
It's kind of half and half, to be honest. I would say it's probably like 60-40. So I'm probably mostly men, but I have a good number of females. A lot of them are also lifestyle clients. So it's not I don't only take on bodybuilders. So it's a fairly good balance, but right now it's a little bit more lean towards men. The thing that I always tell people is if you want to like train hard and make a real change, I will work with you. I don't care if you're trying to get on stage. I don't care if you're trying to be Mr. Olympia. I don't care if you're just looking to lose 20 pounds. Like, as long as you show up and give me the effort and the communication that we need to make this effective, I'll take you on. I don't have a problem with it. But I'm also going to be up your ass. Like, I'm going to be somebody that, like, you paid me for this. If you're saying that this is what you want, I'm going to hold you to a standard. And that's my standard. And it works for some people, it doesn't work for others, but so far with the people that it does work with, it comes together very well.
I I have to say, like I have so much respect, and I don't think this is new, but I think it's something that I've picked up on more recently. And that is your posts that are very very much targeted towards like, hey, this is my standard for coaching, and these are my expectations for clients. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I think it's something, honestly, for the past couple months, like I would say every like season, every quarter, I go through a phase where I'm like, okay, like what can I do as a coach to be better? How can I better make, these relationships with clients facilitate better progress for them? But it always leads me back to really some of the same questions, which I'm sure you've had to ask yourself and really like sift through. And that does come from like having boundaries yourself as a coach. Because I mean, I think in this space, anyone and everyone, they can get in, they can get a client roster going, but there aren't a lot of people who like really will be like, no, like these are the days I am in business that I'm available to be contacted. These are the acceptable standards and the things that you can bring to me, and past this, I'm sorry, but this is out of my scope. This is not what we agreed upon, and I need to honor myself by upholding that.
100%. And I think if you look at any of the coaches who handle like a large roster, they all do that. They all do that because like I wouldn't say my roster is huge. I have 50 people, right? Like it's a decent amount, but like I know people who have 100 plus, 200 plus clients. And there's some people who have that many and don't really handle it well, and it tends to show. But the guys who do handle that well, they all manage their time that way. Hey, look, this is your day to check in with me. These are the times you can communicate with me. This is what we're going to discuss. And like, I don't, this is going to sound bad, but I don't have time for the fluff. I don't have time for you to give me a dissertation on the reason that you didn't stick to plan, right? Like, I just need you to tell me that I didn't stick to plan. And like, there's obviously an emotional aspect to coaching, and I'm very well aware of that. Like, I'm that person as well, that like when I was working with somebody, there would be times where like I would start to get in my head and I'd want an explanation or whatever. And then it would always come back with a, hey, relax, I got this. And it's like, oh yeah, I need to shut up. I just need to be a good client and just listen. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with giving data and letting somebody know that like something's going on or whatever. But I made a post about it not that long ago. I was like, when you start using word salad, where it's just like bombing me with stuff, and I now have to go through an essay to find the two things that really mattered, it's too much, right? So it's like managing that time that you spent. Like, I also at the same time, if somebody sends me a dissertation like that, I don't necessarily always have time to send a long response back. So I'm going to cut out a lot of the crap, and I'm going to go directly to the answer, and it's going to be a lot shorter than what you sent me. So it's like making those boundaries on when you communicate, what your hours are, and like specific parameters on like check in by this time or don't. Like those kinds of things. The people who do that, and I didn't used to, and it's something that I had to learn. And it's not easy to do, to tell somebody, hey, I've got to do something right now. I can't respond to you, because they are paying you for a service. But you have to set that boundary. And what you're going to realize is when you make that boundary, people will respect it. And they will be like, the ones who don't will go away. And then you don't have time for those people, right? That you probably didn't need them in the first place. So, yeah, I feel like I was about to get off subject there, but yeah.
No, oh gosh, no, you articulate yourself very incredibly well. And I know the perception around that is that, I mean, like, because you preface this with like, hey, this could sound bad. I respect you more for being public about that and owning that, like as a fellow coach, but also being coached by others in the past. The people who didn't respect their own time, I don't feel like, for one, they're able to provide the same kind of service, and two, I think there tends to be a discrepancy in their consistency in that quality. And that's something that as a client, I think about. I'm like, what do I need from a coach? And I've had those coaching relationships that were less professional, and not in like a scandalous kind of way. It was just like I coached with people that frankly they didn't have those standards for themselves. They weren't as direct as I needed them to be, and in turn the following coach that I had, all I wanted was professionalism. Like all I wanted was to the point. I don't want to share things about my personal life. I'll share what's necessary, but there's going to be a degree of privacy because I want to preserve that kind of relationship. And I also, as a client, I want the coach to know that I am serious and that I don't expect them to be, let's say, a secondary boyfriend or even a therapist. And I think that's where, like, I have people come to mind where I'm like, I hear how they operate within the coaching realm, and they'll be like, well, this client, she broke up with their boyfriend, or this, client is going through X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I'll inquire, like I'll be nosy, but like, how many check-ins a month or the term over 12 weeks has this person, and I'm gonna use the word burdened because that isn't what was agreed upon on the consult. 15-minute free consults, I talk about like what hasn't gone well with the previous coach, what's not allowed you to be successful in your coaching experience, your dieting experience. And never once has someone been like, well, I had personal issues going on and they didn't take an hour out of their Saturday to talk about it. It's never
That's a
been
good
brought
point.
up. So then it's
That's
like,
a very
hey,
good point.
like when you're asking for more than what was agreed upon, maybe there are cases where there's some leeway, but there has to be a certain point whereas the coach, like, you owe it to yourself. And this is not an easy, this doesn't come natural to me. Like I've been through, I've paid thousands of dollars this year to have professionals tell me, like, you need to respect yourself more and you need to practice this. Not when it's easy. When it's easy, that doesn't really count. You need to practice it when it's hard, when it's the friend who you're coaching who's like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z, but they continue to push that boundary and
Yep.
ask for more and more.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a delicate balance because like if someone is going through a situation like that where it's like they just need to talk to be able to process whatever it is that they're dealing with, where it's a breakup or a personal thing, like that can, if they're in a prep, that can be something that, all right, I need to know this because maybe we got a bad response, right? But I don't need you to trauma dump on me about the ins and outs of what he did wrong to you. Just let me know, hey, I'm in a bad headspace. This happened, just to make you aware. Like that's it. That's all I need. I don't need the whole backstory but behind why he's a piece of shit and all these other things. Like the I care about the individuals, and that's one reason why my clients have said that so many good things about me as a coach is because I care about that individual. And like I can't help but make a bond with those people, especially when they, like I have people who have been with me for almost 3 years. So like you're going to make a bond over that time. And yes, I give a shit about you. Yes, I am here to help you. But like, you're not paying me enough to be your therapist, your trainer, your best friend. Like, you're not paying me enough for that time. And there's a 4-year-old in the other room who needs that time way more than you do. And like, not to be rude, but that is the circumstance. And like, at the bare bones of it, if I wanted to be a dickhead, you have one day to check in with me, and that could be the day that you communicate with me, right? And that could be it. And there's a lot of coaches that do that. And I give way more to people, but there's people who start to take advantage of that. And when that line starts to get crossed, you have to have a hard conversation. And you have to go, look, I understand that I've done these things before. I probably pushed this a little bit further than I should have and allowed myself to get this away. We need to rein this back in and put boundaries back down. And like, my friends know me as like, I get called an asshole for this, but like if they actually know me as an individual, they would understand like why. It's like I'm a very direct person. Like when I speak with you, I'm going to be very direct about things. I'm not going to be a dickhead about it. I'm not going to like say it in a manner that's going to make you feel bad. But like if you ask me a question and it doesn't need more than like a yes, like it doesn't, this doesn't need to be some other thing. So it's like if you ask me a question, be ready for the answer because it might not be what you want to hear, but you're always going to know that I'm going to tell you the thing that you need to move forward. Like that. If I hurt your feelings with something I say that is truthful, but you needed to hear it, I get it, but that's on you, not me, right? So it's like, don't ask the question if you're not actually looking for the real reason, because I'm only going to answer you if it's something that's going to help you. Like, and if you get offended by that, then sorry, that's again not on me, you know?
And I want to expand on that because I know it can sound very abrasive and it can sound like, well, that's not what I'm wanting. I'm wanting support. And the thing is, like, I have been in relationships, both professional and personal, where the other individual didn't respect me enough to tell me, to give me that direction, to even just give me their honest feelings. And really, when I think back, I'm like, okay, thinking back to coaching situations where I was very hesitant on, like, the current projection, the strategy, whether or not it was going to be ready in time, the approach we're taking. And I look back and I see it almost like as a sign of disrespect to me. I'm like, wait, so you thought I was too sensitive to handle the truth. Like you thought like I wasn't tough enough, like I was too weak, I was too fragile to be able to hear something that may not be palatable, that may be difficult to digest in the moment, but ultimately is going to get me where I need to get faster, where I'm trying to go faster. And it's those relationships that I think back, I'm like, okay, that person didn't actually care. Like they
Yeah.
didn't respect me enough to give me the truth, even if it was hard to hear in the moment.
Right.
So I want listeners to really like, I mean, like, I know some of them be like, that's mean. And like, I don't like this Nick guy. Yo, Nick's fucking sick. Nick is great. And he does a lot of
It,
good things for a lot
it,
of people.
the the thing is like, and this has been another focus of mine in the last year that like I've really had to hone in on is communication is 100% of this job, right? And like the words that we say have power, right? So like if I have to deliver bad news, I'm not going to fluff it. Like, look, this is what it is, and this is what we have to do to get there. Are you ready for it or not? Right? Like that is the plain and simple of it. So like there is this dance of like, and it's something that like as I mean I've only been coaching 100% for like the last 3 years, so I am a newer coach, right? So learning learning that like I can deliver this in a manner that's going to completely derail this, or I can deliver this in a manner that's going to help this be productive and move forward, right? Because it's like I'm going to have to tell you something that you don't want to hear at some point, and I have to make sure that when I deliver that to you, that the rails don't fall off and that it doesn't completely set us back. So like having that dance of understanding know when to deliver that information, how to deliver that information, and specifically to that individual is like a very delicate balance. Like there's people I know that I can go on and go, hey, you look like shit today, we got to do this, right? And they're going to handle it and go, cool, I look like shit, let's move. If I say that to some people, they're going to fall apart for like a month. And like, so it's a matter of like how you present the things. And to be completely honest, the thing that changed my coaching is not responding to check-ins with just a message, right? Because like the communication is so much more than a text. And a lot of times if I'm just texting somebody, I sound like a dick, like, because there's no inflection. There's no, like, they can't see my facial responses. They can't see those things. And again, it's very direct. And then when somebody reads that on the other side without like my thought process of how I worded it, they can turn it into this guy is pissed off, right? So like recording videos for clients using Loom and sending that to them when they do check-ins so they can see what I'm looking at. I pull up their pictures next to each other. I talk about the weights. I talk about what's going on with like the login stuff, like their daily habits, their stuff about their sleep, their steps, their appetite, their digestion. It's like I go through these things and go, cool, this is what happened. This is why we got this result. This is what it looks like compared to last time, and this is how we move forward. Like in the most direct response I can. Like it's not, I don't send them 30-minute videos. Like 5 minutes is a long video. I can get a lot of information to you very quickly and then toss all the rest of the shit that you don't need to hear. Like it's just stuff that I need to have as data in the background that I'm going to take notes on. So it's like I'm going to go directly to the most important things, show you where you're doing well or bad, and tell you how we fix it going forward based on the data you should have been logging.
See, I love that. And I do think in some ways, like inadvertently, you're teaching the client where they need to put their efforts moving forward in their check in, like the things that they need to care about. And this isn't a knock. Like it can, oftentimes it can sound negative. It can sound like, oh, you're just talking from a soapbox. It's like, no, like I was that person. Like I was that lunatic who was like, hey, like these are all these data points. I've got 12 different data points from the last 7 days in here. I've got, several sentences from each day depicting what happened and how I felt about what happened and my thought process. And it's like, maybe there's a time when some of that is relevant,
Yep.
but it can also be just really just like note taking, just journaling for the client. But when it comes
Yep.
to the coach, like ingesting that information and then delivering back, I do think that there's merit in calling attention to the things that matter most and not necessarily skimming by, but really focusing on those things that are really going to move the needle, or potentially even areas that the client hasn't addressed because they might not realize this carries a lot of weight in terms of the decision making process for both of us.
100%. 100%. Like I have no problems. Like I have a number of clients who like when they have their box that says, "Hey, what are you feeling? Fill me in on what's happening this week." They take full advantage of the fact that it can take a long response, and that's fine. But when they do it, as long as it's direct and they give me bullet points and it's not like a bunch of fluff, it works great. I'm fine with you giving me a bunch of details. That's way better than you just telling me good. Like
Yeah.
like that drives me just as nuts. Is like I haven't seen a check-in or heard from you in the last week and all you say is good. Like, okay, cool. Like give me something to work with here. So I don't mind that somebody gives me a lot of details, but it's like cut out the stuff that's for your therapist. Like cut out the stuff that you need to take to your best friend and like hash out with them about, and just give me the stuff that directly affects what we are trying to do.
I love that. And I do think you highlighted a really important point, which is then on the other end of the spectrum, the client that doesn't communicate. And I've been this client as well. I was in the more, I guess, more fluid, I guess, flowery language with certain check-ins. And then I went straight to, nope, I'm going with the bare minimum. And that
Yep.
inadvertently can also bite you in the ass, because then it's like this coach doesn't actually know how you're doing. And
Yep.
specifically when we're talking about prep, I mean, I'm highlighting the prep where literally I was just like, I was that client's like, okay, you say jump, how high? I hate that I said that, but I hate when clients say that, because I'm like, I'm going to tell you to jump pretty fucking high, and I don't think you're going to jump. I don't think
Yeah.
that, I don't think it's going to be like, you're very confident, maybe you will, but I digress. No, being that client also on the other end where it was like, I didn't want to tell my coach when I was uncomfortable. And that's that in itself. Like I have a section within my subjective feedback that's very much like, what is your perception around what we're doing? How do you feel about the rate of loss? And essentially the close-ended question I'm trying to ask, but I want to give them some room to elaborate, is, hey, if I drop calories, are you going to be non-adherent this next week? Or if I ask you to eat more, are you going to just give up and like throw in the towel?
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, I'm not going to do either of those things, because it's
That's a
not going to be
great
useful.
That's a great question. I like the way you worded that. I might have to steal that from you. But
Yeah,
it
they good.
the the perception on the, like, at least from my end, when a client just tells me good, is that like are you putting in effort, right? Especially with like, look, I have some of my best clients give me like less than a sentence, right? But I can see through their physique that they are doing what they are supposed to. If you are not that client who is making crazy progress every check-in, I'm going to need a little bit more stuff, right? And if that means if you're a lifestyle client and you're natural and maybe we're going through like a building phase, it's probably going to be pretty slow here. So it's kind of difficult for me to tell what's happening when like you're not communicating with me during the week and the only thing you tell me is good on your check-in. Like to me, it's like, okay, cool. Like, I hope you're doing what you're supposed to. I hope I'm giving you what you need. Good luck. Like that's how it feels on my end. So it's like, I ask my clients when they do that, it's like, find something, just tell me something to make me feel better. Like, help me with my anxiety. I help you guys with
Yes.
yours. Help me with mine. Okay.
Well, and I think it still comes back down to what amount of information is noise versus signal. How much of this is going to be utilized and is truly necessary. And like for the clients, like, gosh, I've talked about this client like 2 or 3 times, no longer client, but literally our first check-in, I have a section on my spreadsheet that's like dietary deviations. And I word it that way, not like, did you cheat on your diet? But I'm just like, what do you consider a deviation? Because like some people, very creative. Some people are like, well, I fasted today and I allocated, those are rollover calories. Like, we're good. I still hit my weekly average. And I remember she checks in, she's doing macros, but like gave her meal plan because she's like, I need structure. Cool. And then she, I think it was under one of the aspects of like adherence or dietary deviations. And she's like, was I on track? Who knows? I'm like, you know, you're the only one who knows. Like, there's no way I'm the last person who would ever have an inkling of the degree you were on track or the degree you were off. And I remember just like, it sent me on a spin cycle. I was telling Jordan for like
That is so
hours. I'm
funny.
like, what do you mean? Who knows? You're the only person who knows. And that's where it's like, in the case of a client who is ambiguous, and I'll just say, like, to her credit, I don't think she was trying to be sneaky. I don't think it was like, I'm just gonna not. I think it was as adherent as she could be and didn't want to write out. You gave
Yeah.
me 2,200 calories. I was over that. I did not stick to it, and I'm disappointed in myself. But
Yeah.
even something like that, I've had those clients too who write it out like, and it's amazing, especially when it's transformation clients who've gone through like significant weight loss, and they're, dude, in my experience, the ones I've worked with, they've taken so much ownership. They're like, I know I didn't lose weight, or I know I only lost 1.5 pounds this week as opposed to the two I was averaging. It's like,
Yep.
I went and had this meal. I'm going to get on it this week. If it doesn't happen, then I think let's drop calories. Like, I love that kind of
Yeah.
personal accountability. And then just like, no, Corey, this is what we're doing. I'm like,
Yeah.
sick.
The,
Like,
the
go.
most fun on the other end is when they're like, "Ah, I just don't know why my weight's dropping." And then, did you have any off plan food? There's like 3 days of things. It's like, well, that's why. Like, you answered your own question. I don't know what you need to ask me for. Like, those
I
ones are always fun.
Yeah, no, that dietary deviation section, it gets a little dicey because yeah, like I'll ask people like, what are we counting as deviations here? They're like,
Yeah.
well, I subbed out the chicken and rice for Panera. What did you have at Panera? Because Panera doesn't have one thing you can order. Like, I promise you, you probably didn't have a salad with like all the things
Yeah.
removed. You
I, I
probably
break.
had,
I break. I say it like when I do once I put somebody's program on Kahunas, I send them a video to break down everything that I'm doing so that they have an idea of the madness, right? Look, this question here, anything that you didn't cook and weigh yourself is off plan. Figure it out. Like just
yeah.
that make it that simple. Don't try to play this whole rigmarole of, well, I had Chipotle. Okay.
Dude, that's exactly why my weight hasn't been going down the last 2 weeks. I had a conversation with Jordan. I'm like, okay, we're stalled. Like, no, we had Mac in town, James McIntosh.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, so he came in to
Awesome.
visit us. It was like the first 4 days into dieting. I'm like, all right, this isn't, we're gonna put off our start date. I like took check-in photos and everything. I'm like, we're gonna go out to eat. Like this isn't
Yeah.
actually but then like after that it's funny because like being with Jordan, like he eats, I mean, dude, at his peak he was eating 4,200 calories, like just at the tip top, like trying to get in as much food as possible.
I don't miss
And
that.
yeah, I'm like, you're insane. Like, but when we transitioned, when he started eating a little bit less, which less for him is like 3,600, like it's still so much food per body
Right.
weight. I dropped my food down, and one of the things like for him, like it's just a hack is like he'll get Chipotle or he'll get like chicken meets rice, like just something kind of simple. And for him, he does have the discrepancy where it's like it's okay for him to be a little bit over his like his
Right.
threshold is a little
He's a
more forgiving.
performance guy. He's not getting on
Totally.
stage.
Well, and too, like just he tolerates calories so well, probably on account of how he trains and just how well he takes care of himself. But like for me, I was like, okay, like first week actually back on track, I was like hitting like 1,600, and I'm like, okay, like we talked, he's like, is there anything we need to do to like modify so you feel a little more okay or like certain about what you're doing? I'm like, yeah, honestly, the Chipotle, like even though I eat it pretty consistently, we know that it's not accurate. Like we know it's not 100%, and like he's weighed it out like before. Sometimes you get 3 ounces of chicken, sometimes you get six.
Yep.
And at that point it's like when you're trying to create a deficit, if your deficit's only 300 or 400 calories and that's eating up potentially that deficit per day,
Yep.
it's like it's not really worth it. So it's like I tell people, like some of the clients who are very flexible, I'm like, if you can do it in a way where it doesn't affect your deficit, I can get on board with it. But we also need to understand, like, if progress is slowing or not happening at calories it should happen, we
Yep.
do have to tighten up the reins.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and there's a lot of things that like, look, I don't care that you went to the restaurant and you asked for no butter and no this and no that. It's like there's gonna be stuff in it. Like I guarantee it. Like that's not how restaurants work. Like they want their food to taste good, so that means there's gonna be stuff in it. Like you just need to understand that like just because you weighed it out and just because you were as close to that diet as possible does not mean we're going to get the same results as you making that food at home. Like it's just the long and short of it. So like I don't care that you macro matched. I don't care any of that stuff. Like cool, that's great that you did it, but we could still be holding a little bit of water, slowing down that rate of loss, like whatever that might be. And I don't know about you, but I'm really not like a cheat meal coach. Like,
Yeah,
I
me
don't go
neither.
out of my way to tell people go have a cheat meal. If they ask me and they're in off season, yeah, sure, go ahead, but just do it far away from your check-in. So like if you check in on Fridays, do it on Friday or Saturday. Like, don't do it the day before, and like that's fine. Just don't eat something that's going to ruin your stomach, and just understand that that is off-plan food. It is going to give us a response that we're not used to. Just be prepared for it, and that's okay. But like, don't ask me in prep. Definitely don't ask me in prep. And like, there's been a few circumstances in the right, with the right client, the right individual, like maybe not necessarily the right mindset, but the person who needs that extra thing. Like, cool, this is going to be a reward for you. I'm going to dangle this in front of you. You better work your fucking ass off to get it. And if you don't, I'm not giving it to you. So it's like, I'm definitely not I don't go out of my way to go, hey, go have a cheat meal, because it's like I get it. Like I've been the 265-pound bodybuilder who's eating everything in sight, and like you have cravings and you don't want to eat chicken and rice, and that burger sounds way better and it's an easy way to get in a lot of calories. But when it's something that's like consistent, it's a problem. Like when it's, it's multiple times a week, you're going to cause some stomach issues. You're going to cause like digestive issues. You're going to cause like water retention. You're going to cause things to slow down. You could end up gaining too much body fat when we don't need to do that in whatever circumstance we're in. So it's like it should be something that is limited. It should be precise and like done in the right manner, just like everything else we do.
I completely agree. And that's the thing, like the best I've looked on stage, it occurred when I wasn't doing cheat meals. And I do think like people they don't really believe this, but like the 22 prep I did the last time I competed, I prepped for 16 weeks. I never really adjusted food outside of towards the tail end. And I mean, like, it was a very brief period of time. I
Yep.
adjusted cardio. It didn't get crazy, didn't abuse any kind of fat loss agents. Everything was very, very low and slow. But I think what allowed me to see continued progress is the deficit was consistent, and I was eating the same kinds of foods every single day. There weren't these splurges on even like vegetables or fruits that I'm like, "Oh, it's raspberries, I'm not going to track these," or, "It's okay, I'm just
Yep.
going to load up on 500 grams of additional veggies that, I hope don't stick." And like
Right.
I know that sounds very eating disorder. I get it, but in the essence of
It
like,
matters.
hey, like I don't want someone to have to do makeup work, and I really don't want someone to have that stress of like I didn't lose weight off, for a female 1400 calories.
Yep.
I'm like, you should lose weight. Like for most
Right.
outside of our petite females, like that is a good deficit that you're in with some
Yep.
moderate cardio. It's like you should be seeing about a pound come off roughly around that time or around that intake. And when you're not, I mean, like I've been that person too who's like, man, this sucks. Like this is defeating to not see that, result at the end of the week when you go to check in. But
Jesus Christ.
it usually can be tied back to food reporting. That's what I always tell people is like, this is so much simpler than, and it's annoying because it's like, that's the one thing you can't like cheat. Like your body's going to take account of what goes in and it's going to tally it out for you.
Yep, 100%. Sorry, that thing was going off loud. But yeah, I mean, it's like my WhatsApp is pinging over here. Hopefully, that's not
No, you're
too
good. You're
bad.
good.
Too bad. But like there's a time and a place to use those things. And like there was out of all the clients that I've had this year, I've had one person use burger and fries to carb up. And the only reason that we ended up doing it is because for whatever reason, when we gave him just a ridiculous amount of sodium, we got a way better look. It didn't like there was nothing that I could do with like I could do the same amount of carbs, same amount of protein, same amount of fat and all clean food. There was no way to match the amount of sodium that he would get from some burgers and fries. And every single time we did it, we got the look that we wanted. Every time I tried regular food, we didn't. So I was like, cool, this is what we're going with. And that is a very specific case. Like that is not something that I do with a lot of people. And it's because the thing is data we're not ready for. It's data that we haven't tested. It's like, why would we throw something in that we just don't know how you're going to respond to it, and that has the potential to cause stomach distress, which it's a killer for when we're trying to get a physique peaked, right? Like if your stomach's messed up, I'm not going to be able to peak you well at all. It doesn't matter what we do.
Absolutely. And I think this even further applies to female athletes. I mean, like just looking at the size discrepancy, but then also like what we need in terms of the shape. And this applies to all female divisions. I mean, like the waist is the centerpiece, and if that's blown out, you can take someone who is like structurally very freaky, their waist isn't as tight, and it's not the same physique anymore.
Yep.
Now,
100%.
okay, I wanted to steer the conversation. This has been great, by the way.
Yeah,
You're great.
it's
I'm so
awesome.
glad you're doing this.
Yeah, I'm glad you're
What
having me. It's awesome.
I want to go back to your female athletes because I mean, like you said, you have a girl in wellness. Do you work with a lot of figure or women's physique?
I have. I had my client Stacy last year won the overall. It was women's bodybuilding. There was only one other girl. She won the overall for women's bodybuilding, and then she was also in figure, and I think she got second in her class. No, she got first in her class on that one, but didn't win the overall. And then ended up getting fifth at nationals not that long later, like the week after Battle of Texas last year, and did very well. I have a number of wellness girls. I have a bikini girl who's like getting back in the groove of things. And then I just had a call the other day with a pro women's bodybuilder, which would be a blast to take on. She's freaky big. Like it'd be really cool to do. But I've honestly gotten a lot of wellness competitors in the last year. A lot of females really looking to do wellness. Like that seems to be the direction a lot of females are trying to go is into wellness. But yeah, I mean, I've worked with a couple of figure girls. I've worked with some of the more heavily muscled females and stuff. So it's a very interesting thing, and it's been one of the biggest things that I've been focused on in the last year because I was having more girls come to me, and like one of the craziest things to me that I've realized in the world of female competitive, the female competitive side of things is like a lot of people are trying to prep females like they're small men. And it's like with no regard to the female physiology and the menstrual cycle. And it's like, look, women have a very short period of time where they have a reproductive like hormone cycle. And at some point it shuts down. And when it shuts down, that is attached to a lot of bad things that happen to women as they get older. You shouldn't start that process early. Like you shouldn't start that process when you start competing at 20. It's not normal for you to not have a period like when you're in your mid 20s, early 30s. Like that should still be functioning well. So the disregard to like that whole thing and seeing what some of these coaches are doing made me go, I need to know what I'm doing. I'm never going to have the experience of what it's actually like to have a menstrual cycle, but I can be so well versed in it that I can at least understand what might be going on so that we can get the response that we need.
I love that that was your thought process, even with like the higher divisions, where obviously like there's going to be a level of sacrifice and acceptance around, you know, what risks are assumed just competing in higher level divisions. And for listeners, when I say higher level, I mean higher degree of muscularity and higher conditioning requirements. So higher meaning they need to get leaner. Now, when we talk about like really the dysregulation of an ovulatory cycle. I've spoken about this at several points in different facets around how like this is something that is exacerbated by the use of PEDs. But I think a lot of people jump the gun and think, okay, PEDs are ultimately what's causing that dysregulation, where mistakenly what we're seeing is that the state of contest prep, being in that state of low energy availability for an extended duration, being under recovered, being undernourished, that ultimately is what's signaling to the hypothalamus, to the brain that, hey, we're not in a position where we can allocate these resources to non-critical functions. And I almost equate it, I've used this analogy before, is like, you know, you think back to high school, like some people's parents were like really strict. It's like you get a B minus, okay, grounded, no parties for the next month, not going to homecoming. Okay. Alternatively, you have the parent who's like, oh, well, you failed out of this class, you got caught drinking underage. Well, okay, just like don't do it again. It's kind of a slap on the wrist, you know?
Yep.
That is the equivalent of someone's like resilience.
It is Optimus Prime toy.
Oh, no,
Sorry.
you're good. You're good. That's the equivalent to someone's resilience. And ultimately,
Yep.
there's no way to really know going into working with someone is like, how resilient are they going to be? It's
Yep.
because, like, Yeah, for some people, they're going to have the strict parents. And in this analogy, if I completely lost listeners, the parent is your body's internal, judge, basically saying, like, hey, you're getting close to being undernourished. I'm taking the keys away. You're grounded. You're staying home the rest of the term, whatever. And that's where I think we have to pay respect to that individual's resiliency and whether or not they are built for the sport. But that's a huge genetic component. Those are the cards you're dealt. And it's like we can do things to help, optimize to help allow for more runway within someone's season. But ultimately, if someone has those super strict parents that are going to take away the keys, we have to respect that, not just in terms of PED use, but even in terms of timeline design and the extent at which we push them to those low body fat levels.
Yep. I mean, you already said it. It's like you can get a dysregulated menstrual cycle from just not eating enough. You can get a dysregulated menstrual cycle from being too lean, right? Like there's a lot of things that can cause dysregulation to that. And then you add drugs on top of it. And of course, you're going to be in a situation where like you're going to have a dysregulation. But the thing is like I have a natural wellness competitor who's 2.5 weeks out right now, hasn't touched anything at all, and literally just had her period. And we're 2.5 weeks out, like, and she's crazy lean, she's ready to go, and she's still having a healthy menstrual cycle. And like, sure, it wasn't always that way. It wasn't always like we've had some dysregulation and we've had some like kind of funniness going on, but the fact that it is still occurring is a win for us because that natural ebb and flow of those hormones is actually what's going to get us a better look. Like when your body's not fighting its physiology, you look better. And that goes for men too. Obviously, we don't have this hormone cycle that goes up and down like that. But when you have a better control over your hormone fluctuations, whether you're male or female, you're going to come out better on top. And like, I think too many girls are coming into the sport early before they really learn what their menstrual cycle is. It's just this like magic word that gets thrown out of like my menstrual cycle, and they don't understand what it means. It's like, oh, I know that means I'm gonna not feel great for this number of days out of the month, and it's gonna make me emotional at certain times. But beyond that, they don't know what those hormones and stuff do in the body that cause those ebbs and flows, right? So it's just like they never learn it, and then again, like I said, I'm never going to have a menstrual cycle. So I'm sure that week is hell. I'm sure it's not fun. And to have to do that every single month, it doesn't sound like fun. So I'm sure when you're young and don't really know any better, it's probably like, oh, I don't have a period. Great. I don't have to deal with that anymore. And it's like, well, that's not the right thing to do. We just need to make sure that we manage that menstrual cycle so that you don't have these aggressive side effects. And like, there's certainly circumstances where like we're not going to be able to manage that no matter what we do. It's just how your body responds. But we can mitigate it as much as possible by making sure that that progesterone, the estrogen, it all floats up and down in the right manner to support the most healthy version of that cycle for you. Because like I said, like I feel bad in a way for female competitors because it's like all of us have a short window on how long we can do this, male or female. Women have an extra short time period because there's like a number of years where you can compete, you can do it enhanced, you can do all those things and still manage to come out on the other side and be fertile. But then you start to get to this line where it's like, if I keep going, I have to now decide that I'm never going to be fertile again. If you have done this thing mismanaged for a decade already, right? Like if you started competing when you were 20 and by 21 you had a super aggressively dysregulated menstrual cycle and then you don't have it for years on end, which is what I've heard a number of times, like you're shortening that time span. And like I already said, there's so many things that happen to women as they age. When that menstrual cycle goes away, you don't want to start that early. You don't want to be going through menopause at 35. Like that doesn't sound fun, or 30 or whatever the craziness is. So it's like just understanding that like that you cannot just throw a hormone or a pill at this and go, you're fixed. Right. And that seems to be because it's much easier to get somebody to adhere to taking a pill daily than it is to get them to adhere to a better lifestyle. So, like, of course, the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies are going to go, cool, we know how to fix you. Here's this pill. And then, of course, the person on the other end of it goes, my doctor told me this works. This is going to help. Cool. And that's the extent of what they do. And then they're doing the same thing with a coach because they're looking at a coach as if they are a doctor. They're the person in the place of power that is making decisions for you, right? You're not making these decisions. Somebody else is telling you, hey, take X, Y, Z. And you're going, damn Skippy, I'm going to do it, right? Without any thought process behind it and any like research, right? And like the thing that just blows my mind is these cycles that come at me from some of these other coaches that I've taken clients from. It's like, you were doing fucking what? You were taking how much of this? Like, are you okay? Like, is everything okay still? Like, it blows my mind. And then girls do that for year after year after year, and it just compounds to a point where it's like, at some point, it's not coming back. At some point, like, the unfortunate reality is men's physiology and like sexual function is a lot easier to manage than a female's. That doesn't mean that there's going to be men who like we can do every fertility protocol in the world and it's never going to come back, but that percentage is much smaller. Like we're much more resilient on the hormone side of things than females are. It's a very delicate balance. And if you're supposed to have your menstrual cycle for this number of decades and then you only have it for 5 years out of that time, like, that sounds like a problem.
And this is even more prevalent for the individual who has been, let's say, living in a state of suppression due to hormonal birth control, which is something, I mean, like for listeners, you're familiar, like I've talked about this very openly, is like, if you are that person who's like, hey, what can I do to, what PEDs can I put in place to essentially optimize what my efforts are now, whether that be fat loss or hypertrophy, you really have to consider that, like, if you were causing suppression to these vital hormones that will dictate ovulation. And let me back up real quick too, because I want listeners to catch this. Just because you have a period, just because you have a bleed at some point in the month or every 2 months, doesn't mean that you're actually ovulating. So the actual bleed itself, that is in response to progesterone dropping, but you can have an amount of progesterone that's not sufficient enough. So this is why we typically see if progesterone is too low, even if that egg was fertilized, it wouldn't keep. You wouldn't be able to see it out. There would be a part where that egg is now not viable. Now, what's important though, when we start talking about like really making sense of like, is this athlete in a position where they're healthy, where they're balanced? We can't just go off of having that period. And I think that's a good start. It absolutely is something like we should see. Like an absence of a period is pretty much definitive. Like you're not having that rise and fall of estradiol, of progesterone. Now, past that, you're getting the period, but maybe it's irregular. Maybe you're having wild swings in, let's say, the week before, the week of ovulation, or sorry, the week in which ovulation occurs, or the week of your period. If you're having those extreme symptoms of PMS, this is where, I mean, like I had firsthand experience with this. My estrogen was still within normal ranges. It wasn't excessive. It wasn't in super physiological ranges, but my progesterone was only coming up marginally comparatively. So seeing that level of estradiol out of ratio relative to progesterone, that was causing what would seem like normal levels of estradiol to now be excessive and present with those manifestations of excess estrogen or unopposed estrogen, which we know has been linked to different types of either cervical or uterine cancer. I tend to mix those up whenever I talk about this, but going back, we got to see the rise of estradiol and progesterone on lab work. And that's the one thing a lot of people, they're just like, yeah, well, my athlete has her period, so it's cool. Or she gets it like when she's out of prep, or she gets it like a few months after she discontinues. But really mapping this out and being like, if you're going to compete from, let's say, 25 to 35, how many periods collectively have you missed? Because if you're supposed to have 12 a year and you're going 6 to 9 months without a period, let's say for a better part of 50% of that time, I guarantee you that's going to affect your ovarian reserve. And this was something, I mean, for the longest time, I've always said, like, I don't know if kids are in the future, but being 29, I'm like, okay, well, if it's not a no, I do need to have some kind of idea of like, what is my ovarian reserve, which is why I actually went and had my AMH, my anti-Müllerian hormone, checked. And it turns out, yeah, like no surprise to me, it's like that number is much lower, not necessarily, terrible, but it's much lower than where you would expect it to be at 29. Whereas you look at someone who maybe hasn't competed, my sister's a good example, being in her 30s, having had multiple kids at this point, even through IVF, her AMH, much higher, much more appropriate for her age, and even potentially resilient based on different classifications. We have to consider these things, though, when we're talking about the female who maybe is more of a recreational competitor and even like a hobbyist. I just want to do one show, just see how it feels, see how I perform. if you're close to that family planning stage, we need to have this information. And this isn't to say, like, well, if your coach doesn't have this checked, they're a bad coach. It's not it at all. It's just to say, like, it is you, it is your responsibility. And if you're not working with a coach who maybe is aware that, like, these things are important to you, I would say at baseline, the starting point is having that conversation with them about it being a priority.
100%. Yeah, I mean, like the coach, if you tell the coach, hey, get me on stage and make me look my best ever, like they might have one version of it, right? And if they don't, if they think that like all hands off, like go at it, like then they're probably going to have a bit less focus on that, you know. So like if it's something that's important to you, you need to like, even if it's something that you're like, yeah, maybe I want to, I definitely want to have kids someday. Like if you're in your early look, I had my son when I was 27. I'm 31. He's 4. Like I was not planning on having a kid at 27. So like to even at the, even now, like if I was like didn't have a kid and I was going, I would still like to have kids. I wasn't prepared to have one, but like trying to make that decision at like in your early 20s that like, I'm never gonna worry about that is like such a drastic thing because like 5 years later that could be completely shifted. But if you did a bunch of damage in those 5 years, you might not have a choice anymore. And that's the unfortunate thing for women is like you have to be very mindful of that if it is something that you do want. Of like what you do in your early 20s will reflect on what happens in your 30s and when you are ready for kids, right? Like if you can be ready for kids, you know?
Absolutely. Now, I want to steer this conversation more towards the realm of what you're seeing in your experience with these athletes who are coming to you in these higher divisions. What kind of expectations do they have? I mean, obviously, I would imagine they expect you to handle with care and to not put them on crazy cycles because that's very much not the brand that you've developed and it's not the branding that you publicly, display. It's also not who I know you to be or who anyone really knows you to be. But are they coming with prior experiences or prior, I guess, like cognitions around like what baseline cycles are for these divisions?
Yeah, I mean that is a difficult thing to manage sometimes because if somebody's coming from a coach that they've been with for a number of years, or maybe they were with multiple coaches who all kind of had a similar perspective of like treating them like small men, they might be like, "Oh, I'm used to taking all of this stuff," and like I make it very clear out of the gate of like, "Look, we're not going to do that. So if that's a problem for you, we just need to move on from this. But if you trust me and you put in the effort, I promise you, I will get you 10 times the results with 10 times less or whatever you want to put, whatever number you want to put on that. Right. And like, it's a matter of the biggest thing that I learned when I was like looking through your stuff, looking through like all these different educational things. Like Dom Kuza is my mentor, and he's helped me with all this stuff. Dom is a genius. The guy is awesome. So when we were like going through all these things, is like, oh, I completely just lost my train of thought.
When you were
What,
going through these things around like cycle design and like what makes the most
Oh,
sense?
right, right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is starting it off in a structure that like we don't have to go hormonal first. There's a number of things we can use that are non-hormonal that are not going to affect your menstrual cycle that will get us the results we're looking for. Because like do you care about how big your cycle was or do you care about how good you looked?
Mm.
Right? Like, let me give you those options. This is the way to look at it. Do you care about how much you took and then got this result, or would you rather just look amazing? Like those are your two things there. Because like, look, the thing here is like nobody gives a shit how much you take. Nobody gives a shit how little you take. Just like nobody gives a shit how strong you are or how much weight you can lift or like what insert whatever thing there. It's not about how much can I do. It's about how much can I do to get a response with everything, with training, with nutrition, with cardio, with drugs, like with all of these things. It is about like what gets us the response. And I guarantee if I went through cycles like of my clients who have done exceptionally well, gotten to like very lean spots, you wouldn't believe me what I did with them. Like I guarantee my heavyweight going into nationals is like the dude is huge and shredded. You wouldn't believe me if I showed it to you because his body just responds that way. Like, and that is a genetic anomaly. That is someone who like responds super well. Not everybody's that way, but I can guarantee I can get you those results without putting you on a number of different injectables at like double digit doses or triple digit doses. Like we don't need that. You'd need just enough. It's like you just got to hit the nail just a little bit and it's going to go in. You don't have to beat the living shit out of it. Like we can just like kind of push it a little bit and pull it back and push it a little bit and pull it back. It's like there's an ebb and flow to this. It's not a race to the fucking bottom or a race to the top in the cycle of like, how much stuff can I take? No one cares.
I you know what comes to mind when you say that? I almost think about like communication is like, let's say, interpersonal or relationship, like you're wanting a response from the person, not necessarily a reaction, but you're wanting to communicate something so that a behavior changes or that a different outcome, presents itself. You can go about it 1,000 ways, but what is the most effective way? What's the most effective way to communicate your message? Is it being a dick, maybe using language that like, is really hurtful and like, just really over the top, raising your voice, gesturing, I don't know, even like going about throwing stuff or just like making a scene, creating noise? Is that the best, like the loudest response or the most, I guess the most character you can put in it? Is that going to get the same reaction? Well, it technically might, it could, but at what cost? And what's going to happen then is the person who's receiving that message, are they going to be hurt by it? Or are they going to be like, well, fine, like I'll do this, but out of fear now, I'm doing it just because. But then there's a lot of resentment and residual, versus if you just effectively communicate like, hey, this is what I'd like to happen and here's why, here's how this is making me feel. And I don't know, that's probably a very like tangential abstract comparison, but I always think about that and like, how do you get what you want? Well, I mean, like, I think like fundamentally, and I forget what book this is from, but it's like you get what you want by convincing the other person that it's worth doing, or in this case, like you use something that is going to be effective in whatever outcome, like the closest similarity in terms of generating that outcome, in not with a dose that it's like, yeah, like you use an amount of a drug you're going to build, but again, at what cost? What are you sacrificing by forcing that growth? And like I would even say, as far to say like guaranteeing that growth, versus if you're a little more conservative, if you do it in a way that does take that additional work and that patience, it's like you could get that same response just over a longer horizon.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And like, this is a conversation that Hunter and I had not that long ago of like, there are so few people really like putting an aggressive amount of effort into just training, right? Like training is what builds muscle. Training is what helps us get the tissue on your body, right? The nutrition is what gives us the calories to build the framework to either lose fat or build muscle, right? The drugs are just there to be enough to keep the train going. It doesn't need to be a supercharged engine that's going to make you go 600 miles an hour down the train tracks. Like that is how you end up in disaster. Like if that train starts going too fast and it can't slow down, it's going to hit something at some point, right? That train track's going to end, something else is going to come up, like something bad's going to happen. So it's about managing that in the right manner and pushing things when it's appropriate and pulling things back when it's appropriate and making sure that you apply things in the right manner while giving people the tools that are actually going to be something that helps them move forward, right? Because like, obviously we're going to make progress in a prep. Obviously we're going to make progress in an off season. Can you make progress in a maintenance phase? If you train appropriately and have the right amount of calories, you're damn straight you can. It might not be as fast as when you're on cycle for prep or off season. You can still make progress. It's not like that's just stagnant. And the way we do that is making sure that we train appropriately and eat appropriately and recover appropriately. Like those are the biggest things here. And too many people, like whether it's a male or a female, are having just chemical warfare thrown at them. And then by the time they're done with the coach, they're like, well, all right, I guess I'm done with that guy. Like, and there's no like ramifications for the person who is telling you to do these things, right? There's no system to hold these people to a standard. So it's like, I'm probably like more conservative than most conservative people are when it comes to these things. And the reason why is because like all of these people at some point are going to go, I don't want to bodybuild anymore. Right? I want them to still be able to like live their life. You're going to be 50, you're going to be 60, hopefully. Like hopefully you reach these numbers, right? We all want to stack as many years as we can that are good years, right? And I don't want to make the back end of your life be a shit show because I was an asshole with you up front. So like the number one thing as a coach that scares me is someone being able to go, that guy fucked me up. Right? That guy fucked me up because of this. You're never going to find somebody who walks away from me going, that guy fucked me up with drugs. It's not going to happen. you are not going to find that person because I'm not going to be that guy. Like, we can get away with so much more than people give credit to. Like, if we discussed doses, like, it would shock you what people are doing as far as like, look, I know what the upper level guys have taken or are taking. Like, some of them I'm very close with, and we've had these conversations, and I've never come close to those numbers, right? And do they need to? Like, is it something that has to happen? Because like, at some point when these drugs scale up to a certain level, like, you're just causing excessive toxicity in the body, period. It's not like more is always better. There comes a point where there's like a negative feedback of like, all right, cool, we kind of reached the threshold of like, this amount is going to get us result. Anything more is just like toxicity in the body that's going to cause inflammation, that's going to cause you to break down, that's going to cause you to feel like shit, that's going to cause you to be in a bad mental headspace, that's just like stuff that creates anxiety and all these bad side effects. It's like, well, maybe we just cut that in like a tenth and take way less than that and train way fucking harder. Have you tried that yet?
So the last podcast I recorded today was with a female competitor who just won her pro show. They're not pro show, I'm sorry. Just won at several points in the NPC, and she's natural. And we were talking about how gosh, it's going to happen to me where I completely blank. Yo, we're just powering through. I'm so proud of us. Both of us, either of us could have canceled today just because of just generally the amount of fluid in our brains.
Yeah.
We did great. No, so specifically when we're talking about like the female athlete and like the propensity to virilize, it's like there's that aspect which I've heavily pushed and like tried to make women aware of. It is like you're okaying a sex change, a very slow, gradual sex change, and like that's okay if that's what you want. Then I would be more aggressive with it if that's what you want, okay? Because like this is not going to happen at the rate which you're hoping. But I don't think a lot of women are doing that for that reason. They're doing it for this other reason. So it's like when you look at the male side of things, it's like there are forms of like the male version of virilization that, you know, does manifest in life expectancy, in quality of life, in these system disorders that absolutely will manifest at very early ages. And when you start looking at like issues with kidneys, it's like, why do you think the kidneys aren't able to perfuse? Why do you think that they're backed up? Probably an issue with your cardiovascular system. So it's like, it's not like, oh, my kidneys are a little fucked, my liver's a little fucked. It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
That's where,
It's all connected.
to your point, it's like we can't pick and choose, and I am glad we're going this direction with it. We can't pick and choose what systems are going to be affected. But God, I had a client this week who was like, male client, not a competitor, who's like, I frankly don't care if I get jaundice. Like, he's 50. He's like, I don't care if I get jaundice when I'm 60. I'm like, you are okay with your skin turning yellow? And that being like the highest, the most surface level, shallow aspect of like that disease process. I'm like, no, you have like you should care about these things. Like you're kind of in, I get it, it's coming from a place of ignorance. It's like you don't realize what you're saying. But when you start, oh sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. You can finish up.
No, sorry, I guess where I started this with, which I blanked now, it came back to me, is I was talking to this other competitor who's natural, and I was telling her like this build that I've been through the last 4 months or so, I have just been on TRT. Like I've been on GH in the past, but this was the first season I was like, okay, I'm gonna build without it. I had other reasons why I removed it, but point aside, just having TRT in place, I've gotten the most growth out of my glutes and off the lowest volume that I've ever lifted at. And I mean, like, I'm sitting at 150, which at the beginning of this build, I was like, yo, like, if I get to 150, I'm gonna want to kill myself. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna mentally, like, rectify that. And truly, it's like, yeah, like, you know, the body fat's there, but at the same time, I'm like, I've never had this kind of density. Like, my back pose at 150 has never looked anything close to this. Shoot, even at 145, even at 140. So it's like, yeah, I know it might not be as sexy to be like, well, okay, this is going to take longer to do this like quasi natural, or, you know, I'm not saying I'm natural, but you know, for listeners who are like, well, isn't that an enhancement? It is, but not in the same way of like
range. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, I would rather go about it this way because of my priorities within the sport. And it's not to say everyone has to have the same priorities or the same desire of muscularity, but I do think at the center of all of this, the training intensity is what allowed me to make that kind of progress on TRT only. It's like you
Yep.
add in anything extra, and like yes, that would have been faster progress. But frankly, it's like if you can still get it out of less, well, now I have this card. I have this primo or anavar cycle that I'm like, next build, I can run that. And why wouldn't I get more progress? And
Yep.
to me, that idea with everything that we've talked about today, that is so appealing from a longevity standpoint, being 29 in the sport, being a pro.
Yep. Yeah, and like the I've talked to a couple of girls who are like trying to push into the like upper levels of wellness and things like that. And there's you can break it down in the most simplest terms of like there's kind of three subsets of people who compete. There's the genetic freaks, there's everybody in the middle, and then there's the genetic freaks on the other end that don't respond at all. Right? Everyone who is not a super genetic elite is chasing the super genetic elite, right? And those super genetic elite can probably get away with a lot less than you, but aren't. So they're taking a lot and already have a high response. They're gonna surpass you way faster, right? So all these people who are below that, whether you're like someone who's kind of good, myself, like a decent bodybuilder, but in order for me to become pro or go higher in the higher into the national levels or like whatever it is, I was gonna have to do things that I was not willing to do to myself, just plain and simple. And there's a lot of people who can't have that conversation with themselves, who are chasing the genetic elite by thinking that the thing that they can do is outdrug them. And that's not how this works. You can't out eat them, you can't out train them, you can't out drug them. And everybody wants to do it tomorrow. And that's the hardest part about this is like a lot of those people who are at the top of that sport now have been doing it for at least a decade, right? There's very few of them who turn pro fast, win their first pro show, and go on to be one of the best in the world. That is a very small thing. And like social media has a really good way of highlighting those people. Like, look what this guy did. In 4 years, he went from an amateur to the Olympia level. It's like that's not everybody. And all of these people, whether it's a male or female, are now getting to a point where they're pushing gear that's just going to ruin you, and you're never going to come close to that. And like, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you that, but there's a lot of females who are like, ah, oh, man, like I want to compete. I really want to do this. And I just see what these girls are doing, and like, I don't know that I can get there. It's like, well, why, like, you just won your pro card. Why are you comparing yourself to the girl who just won the Mr. Olympia? Like, let's look at your level. Look at your playing field, and then compare yourself to those people. Can I do this? Can I do this? And move on and go forward, and give it the time that it requires. Give bodybuilding enough time to where it's not a race to the end, because all that's going to make you do is push things in a manner that you shouldn't, and going to end up giving you a response that you don't want. And for females, that could be never being able to have kids and then regretting that because you're now 35 going, well, I can't bodybuild anymore because it's caused all these issues. And now I can't have a family. So like, what do I do? It's like that's a terrible place for you to be in, and it's, you've got to understand that these genetic elite they're just going to stand out. You can't try and chase them. Like, yes, there are a number of people who like after 10, 15 years or whatever, like they're able to get up there, they're able to win their pro card, they're able to look really good, but like they're probably not going to become Mr. Olympia if it took them that long, right? So it's like, you just need to understand, he just stole my water. You just need to understand like where you are on the playing field. And like the people are going to come for me that are like, oh, if you believe hard enough, you can do anything. And it's like, yeah, I agree, you can, but there's limitations to the human physical frame. And unless you're willing to take that risk that's going to push that needle towards things that you might not necessarily want 20 years from now, that's the decision you have to make. You have to weigh out that risk to reward. Cool. I'm a 30-year-old man. Do I want to be debilitated by 50? No, I don't. So maybe I should stop doing XYZ, right? And like that, I think that just comes up way too fast for people. Like I know it did for me. Like I'd retired. It's hard to retire when you never want to show, but like I retired at 30, right? Because I knew I'm 6 foot tall. Andrew Jacked is 300 pounds. Samson Dowda is 330, 340 pounds in the offseason. I struggled to get to 265. Like, there's a reality to this of like, can I get that heavy? Probably. If I keep doing what I'm doing and I'm willing to be that uncomfortable, I could probably get pretty heavy. But does that mean I'm going to be that I'm even going to be able to turn pro? I don't know. I've never won a local show. Like, so maybe I need to start there and try to win the local show first. But am I even willing to do that? So it's like you have to level with yourself and be really realistic with yourself. And I think that's where a lot of people really struggle, is like being able to tell themselves, I might not be able to do that. I might not be able to be that guy. You know, like I've being out here in Dallas and training at Destination Dallas, like I've gotten myself around some of the biggest names in the world. And like some of my close, like Keon Pearson's one of my best friends. Hunter Labrada's one of my best friends. I see what those guys do and I see how their body responds. I'm not coming close, man. So like at some point, especially now as a father, as a business owner, it's like something's got to go. Something's going to have to change. And people just need to have that conversation with themselves of like, all right, this is how much time I have. This is where realistically I might need to make that decision to be done or not. What can I do in that time period? And is it worth doing? Is it something that's going to be something that I hate myself for doing in a decade? Maybe.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I do want to go back to what you said around like people comparing themselves to the top level. And I guess I want to tell a story a little bit, is like, that was something for me. I was always very much like, when I assess my muscularity, I wouldn't assess comparatively to girls at the top of the national level or even girls that I beat at different pro shows. I was comparing myself to where I wanted to be, and not necessarily, so this is where I think, like, for listeners, I want to be really clear. I think it's okay, in my opinion, I think it's okay to compare yourself to that top athlete and to the top of your division when us making these decisions around like what Nick's describing. Like if you, like for me, I wasn't anywhere near Ashley's muscularity in 21. And even then, even putting on muscle since then, it's like, I wouldn't be surprised, even though I probably put on 5 pounds of muscle, 5 muscles. I've put on 5 muscles, probably put on 5 pounds in the last 2 years. It's still like, okay, realistically, is that going to be enough to be competitive next to people that have also grown during that amount of time? Also with a division that's become more dense and become, frankly, more based around balance and overall being able to have that kind of density without necessarily needing to get so lean. Now, when I made the decision to like not do the show, the continue my season in 2022, because I wanted to, I was like, I've achieved, really high ranking and I've done well at the pro level. My thought was, if I'm nowhere close, like if I'm not getting second or third, then it probably makes more sense to take time off and to get myself to close that gap more, so that next time I come back, I'm in contention around that first, second, third placing, because I'm not interested in getting a 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. And if my goal is just to get on stage because like, hey, this is something I want to do annually, this is something that I feel good about, that makes me feel good, cool. But my goals have always been to continue to progress from a very objective standpoint, and really comparing myself to those top athletes really underscored that I'm not going to be able to do that with the muscularity, because that gap cannot be filled by simply being in contest prep or even with a short stint of PEDs in between seasons.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And like that's the biggest thing that I try to tell people is like, look, if I could guarantee placings, I would be doing a lot better than I am now. And like, I would have every competitor possible if I could guarantee places, right? And the reality is like, I have genetic freaks who have lost shows. It just is what it is. Like, you can't guarantee that somebody's going to place well. The thing that I can guarantee is that we're going to do our damn best to be better than we were last time. And if that's not enough for you, you need to understand that like, you're going to be disappointed a lot. Like, again, coming back to the whole idea of like the person that comes in, wins their first show ever, wins their first national show, goes on and wins their pro debut, and then goes to the Olympia and gets top 10, like that is a rarity. That is probably not you. Like if you have to ask the question, am I a genetic freak? You're not. Like that's just the reality. So it's like in a sport filled with freaks, you have to understand that you're going to come across somebody who's going to beat you at some point. There's one Mr. Olympia. There's one in every single division. There's one person that's the best. And there's how many thousands of people competing? Like the unfortunate reality for you is like you're not always going to win. And you also have to understand that like you're also not always going to get the response you want from your body. Just because you're a genetic freak doesn't mean you're going to have a great peak. It doesn't mean your body's going to do what we want it to in those last few weeks. Like I've seen it. Like we've seen, like I've seen my friends who are the genetic freaks who like it didn't come together well because of whatever reason, right? It just happens. Like that's just bodybuilding. So like you have to learn to disconnect yourself from the emotionality of data, and you have to disconnect yourself from the only measure of you being successful, placings. If you can't do those two things, this is going to be the hardest thing you have ever tried to do, because off season's going to chew you up and spit you out, and then you're going to come back and look the exact same that you did before, and the exact same before that, and the exact same before that. And how many people do we know stuck in that loop?
Man, Emily, she's got to clip that. That needs to be a reel. Dude, this was amazing. I just want to thank you also. Like, I know it's your night with your son. Like, I'm appreciative of your time. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
going to
appreciate
keep
you.
you. Yeah, no, thank you. This has been good. I know that people are going to find value from it. If people want to tune more into your content, which I'm going to recommend everyone who's listening to this right now, go follow Nick Bagley. Where can they find you?
Everything's on Instagram right now. Like I'm not great with social media. I don't really care about TikTok. I've done the YouTube thing, but right now it's just not paying enough for me to want to spend the money on that, because look, I'm not a cameraman. Like, I'm a trainer and a coach. Like I know what I excel at. So if that means that I got to pay somebody to do a YouTube video, like it just right now it's not paying the bills. So once I'm in a little bit different position, I'll start that back up. But Instagram is Nick_Bagley_. All of my stuff is connected to there. So like I have a long haul fitness page that I'm not as active on. And like all my links are on there. So if you want to go to the YouTube and see the videos that I've done, if you want to check out any of the other stuff, it's all listed on my Instagram. So that is the hub.
Amazing. Amazing. Nick, this is great.
Just wait.
Thank you so much for sitting down chatting with me. You guys, thank you for listening. As always, I will see you in the next one.